You're listening to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast, episode number 68. So, today I wanted to come on here and talk about creating a vision for your future. And the reason I think that this is so important is because most people who have been suffering from emotional abuse for so long really have a difficult time seeing the possibility of a joy-filled, beautiful, amazing future. And I thought today I would give you some tips and some techniques on how to do this, and as well as explain why it is so important. Not having a vision can often keep you stuck. It can keep you in that sort of old black and white version of your life, where being able to see the color and the beauty for your future can actually help you get there. So let's talk about it. Welcome to the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to help you heal after a toxic or narcissistic relationship. This podcast teaches you to use your subconscious mind to go from feeling stuck to set free. In here, you will learn how to use the power of your own mind to free yourself from emotional pain, move forward with confidence, and experience the inner peace you deserve in your healing journey after emotional abuse. I'm your host and subconscious reprogramming coach, Allison Dagny. So let's get started. So as you can see, I titled this episode From Black and White to Technicolor, The Journey of Emotional Abuse Recovery. And the reason I chose this was because I wanted to have a metaphor for emotional abuse recovery. And something that I was thinking about was the movie The Wizard of Oz and the transition from the black and white Kansas to the colorful and amazing Oz. And I'm going to give you an example of how this has shown up in my life, and then we're going to talk about why having a vision and being able to hold this vision is so important. So when I was in my emotionally abusive relationship, and you probably already know this for yourself, it is very sad, it's very difficult, and it's hard to feel joy, and it's hard to feel excitement. It's hard to feel happiness, and it seems like something that you should be able to access pretty easily, but is often fleeting. So I'm going to share an example. When I was in that abusive relationship, our family never took vacations with our immediate family, my ex and our 3 children. And often we went on vacations with his family, his parents and his siblings and his nieces and nephews. And most of the time, everyone had an opinion, but I didn't have a lot of say in where we would go or what we did. So this was a pattern throughout the years, and I often wanted to go places that we never went. And one of those places was Hawaii. And my ex had been to Hawaii, and he had been there before I met him with his family. And his opinion was that it wasn't worth it. And it wasn't worth the flight. It wasn't worth the cost. And he really didn't want to go back. Now, I'm not sure that I believe that that's why he didn't want to go back. I think it probably had more to do with cost and things like that. But that's for another episode here. However, it was something that I had always thought about and I wanted to experience. However, it seemed like it was completely out of reach for me and was never going to be possible. Now, fast forward to me escaping that abusive relationship and starting my life on my own with my children and, embarking on my healing journey. And one of the things that I kept thinking about during this time was what I wanted my life to look like. Who did I want to be? How did I want to be acting? What did I want to be doing with my career? What kind of parent? What kind of partner? These were things that I hadn't really thought about before and now was really on my radar. This also included where I wanted to visit and vacations I wanted to take and things I wanted to provide for the people who I loved. Now, there were a lot of things that I was able to do and check off of my list throughout my healing journey. And I believe a lot of this was because I could see this as a possibility for my life. For instance, like writing my book. I knew and I could see that this was going to be something that I was going to do. And I believe that holding that vision in my mind was so paramount to being able to create that. Now, in my relationship with my boyfriend, he had been to Hawaii several times. And because it was on my radar and he and I had talked about it, he thought it was a wonderful place. And so we discussed planning a trip to take my children and he and I to Hawaii. And it took some planning and it took a lot of finances, but this was a big deal. And this was going to be a once in a lifetime opportunity and trip for me and my kids and my boyfriend. Now, Hawaii was the most beautiful place I had ever been, and by far the best vacation I had ever been on. And I know that had I stayed in that abusive relationship, I would have never been exposed to such beautiful nature and such a wonderful time. I absolutely know that without a shadow of a doubt. But what I also know is that had I not been able to see the possibilities for my life, even after emotional abuse, it wouldn't have been possible for me. I had to believe that I was worth it, that my family was worth it, that we deserved it. I had to believe that it was possible and that I could financially make this happen. I had to believe that I was deserving of joy and adventure and excitement and love and fun and all of the things that came along with that. So the reason I'm sharing this story with you is because we're going to be talking about creating this vision, because without being able to see what is possible for your life, most often you will stay stuck if you can't achieve that. Some people are not visual people. Some people have difficulty because they've been stuck in the emotional abuse for so long that it's hard to even imagine happiness, joy, love, goodness at all. And so much of this transition happens when you start to get to the source. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you know that the source is in your subconscious. So for someone who is trapped in an abusive situation, the feelings that they may experience are things like hopelessness, fear, and despair. These are just to name a few. And then if that person is able to escape and get out of the emotionally abusive relationship, the healing starts, or for some people it doesn't start and they're still stuck, or maybe they've tried everything and they've attempted therapy and they've attempted different types of healing modalities and nothing seems to work. So this ends up being this downward spiral of black and white. And emotional abuse, because it has such deep, lasting effects on an individual, including the subconscious mind specifically, this leads to a lot of times this rigid kind of black and white thinking, like nothing is ever going to work for me, or my life is always going to be miserable, or things never pan out the way that I want them to, or I cannot heal, or I'm broken, right? These are kinds of that black and white thinking that a lot of times abuse survivors and victims get stuck in. Now, I want you to know that all of this is because of the programming of your subconscious mind. So if you have these kinds of thoughts and you have had them for some time, I want you to know there's nothing wrong with you. This is just how your brain has been programmed over the years. And from the time that you're born to about 8 or 9 years old, all of the outer influences, your experiences, your traumas, your parents, teachers, even society is influencing the subconscious mind. And all of those things are what create your emotions when reality goes against what you believe. So let's talk a little bit about some of these common patterns and behaviors that I have seen in a lot of emotional abuse survivors and some that I've had for myself. So first, it's important to know that your behaviors and your habits are created through your belief systems. So let me back up here. Your beliefs create your emotions, which drive your behavior. So you can work your way backwards or forward, but essentially the source and the root is always going to be your subconscious beliefs, the things that you've been programmed with for your entire life. So if someone has a pattern of behavior of constantly people pleasing, for instance, and this is one that I experienced and maybe you have as well, that behavior isn't because you are just born a people pleaser. It's because you have some sort of subconscious belief that is driving how you feel and then creating that behavior. So, for example, if you had a deep subconscious belief from years and years of programming throughout your life that the only way that you will be loved is if you do for others, or if you do more, if you exceed people's expectations, then what's going to happen is that subconscious belief is going to create feelings of self-worth that are extremely low or maybe even non-existent. Then what happens is you behave in ways to avoid feeling like that. So your behavior of people pleasing is to try to feel worthy, to try to feel good enough, and to try to feel secure in who you are. So this isn't really as complex as what it seems if you can remember that the subconscious beliefs are driving the emotions, which are then creating the behaviors. So for someone who is extremely confident and has a high level of self-worth, those beliefs that they have, like I am good enough, I am worthy, I am confident, I can speak my mind, I'm not worried about other people manipulating me or controlling me, right? Those kinds of belief systems that are ingrained in someone are going to create feelings of confidence and high self-worth. So those people wouldn't feel the need to behave in a way to people please others. Another pattern, another behavior that I had, as well as a lot of emotional abuse survivors, is not being able to say no. And this sort of goes into the people-pleasing vein. However, if you can't set a boundary, if you have trouble saying no, if you are worried that if you tell people no, that they will reject or abandon you, this all, again, stems from the subconscious. So the deep program beliefs like, I have to say yes, people will abandon me, I will be rejected, I need everyone to like me. Those kinds of beliefs are what drive the emotion, which then result in the behavior. Another one of these is defensiveness, right? When you've been in a state of fight or flight, fawn or freeze in these responses for the majority of your life or even a large portion of your life, you are going to possibly put up defense walls. And this is completely normal. And I did this as well, because when you feel like you're constantly under attack, you have to protect yourself in a certain type of way. And then come the fight, flight, fawn, or freeze responses. And typically, if I'm talking about defensiveness, we're going to be talking about fighting back or defending yourself, that sort of behavior. Now, the belief systems that create that behavior, yes, are also part of a trauma response. And remember, a trauma response is simply an adaptation to the trauma so that you can protect yourself or feel safe or feel secure in your life. So even though these things are subconscious beliefs, and yes, they are also trauma responses and trauma adaptations because they all work together. This has to do with experiences that happen in your life, traumas that you've had to go through, and then the beliefs that go along with that, right? So when those things are at work together, then what happens is your brain stores that as a traumatic memory with the response next, because that response is what will keep you safe. That's what your brain remembers. That's what your brain knows. So if you've been criticized constantly from emotional abuse, day in and day out, chipping away at you, people telling you you're not good enough, maybe verbally abusing you or controlling you, making you doubt yourself, you may be in a state of fight because you don't want that to happen again, especially as a survivor. If someone else in your life says something that is critical, maybe you jump up with defense mode immediately. Now, this doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. This is just the pattern, the habit that has been created to keep you feeling safe. So even if the other person has no ill will and no intention of being like a long-term abuser, let's just say it's a neighbor or your parent or somebody at the grocery store, whomever, right? If they say something that comes across to you as a criticism because you have that stored memory and that stored trauma inside your mind and inside your body, then what happens is you will go into that immediate response. And for most of us, it happens so quickly that we don't even have time to process it or stop it. It is a reaction that happens within a split second because our brain's neural pathways are wired to keep you safe. The problem is this kind of behavior may show up and it may not be necessary. It may not be necessary for you to be on the defense all the time. And that's where, when we get into the subconscious mind, we can figure out what it is in there, the beliefs that we're holding and that we have that are creating the emotion of fear, which then drives that behavior of that response. So these are just a few examples that I've had personally that maybe you have, but maybe you can think of other ones as well. And the important part to remember about this is not just focusing on the behavior, but where does the behavior come from? The behavior is coming from some sort of emotion of either avoiding that emotion or trying to get more of a different emotion. And the emotion is coming from the programming and the belief systems that we've created throughout our lives or that other people have impressed on us from conditioning or brainwashing, that sort of thing. Now, the good news is, because you're aware of this process, you can actually start to change it. Because awareness is the first step. As long as you know where the behaviors are coming from, you can now work to change those behaviors if you so choose. So if you say, I don't want to be defensive anymore, or I want to be able to say no, or I want to stop people pleasing, any of those kinds of behaviors can be changed and shifted. Really, any behavior can, because it's a habit that has started in your subconscious mind. So if you get to the source, which is your subconscious beliefs, and then you're able to start challenging those beliefs and shifting them, then automatically the behavior changes because you don't have that driving the behavior anymore. So let me jump back to this Wizard of Oz thing that I talked about in the beginning, and the black and white Kansas versus the beautiful, sparkling, colorful Technicolor Oz. I wanted to bring this up because if you have a lot of subconscious beliefs in your mind that are causing you to feel sad or causing you to feel angry or causing you to be ruminating, or that are creating feelings like self-doubt, lack of trust in others, whatever that might be, right? There's a number of different emotions that you could be experiencing after emotional abuse. And those emotions can often clog up all of the other good stuff that we really want to be feeling. It keeps us in that black and white so that we can't get to the beauty and the joy and the abundance and the excitement and the adventure, all of those things that we really, really want to have more of. So what most people don't realize is that we have to get that junk out of the way. We have to get that garbage out of the way. The other piece to this is we have to be able to see what it is that we want for our lives. We have to be able to think about what we want to be feeling. So if you're constantly focusing on, I don't want to feel sad, I don't want to be angry, I don't want to be thinking about this all the time. Well, I'm here to tell you, your subconscious mind does not understand negatives. Your subconscious mind throws out that word and immediately, instead of I don't want to feel sad, it takes out the negative and says, I want to feel sad. It focuses on the thing that doesn't include the negative word. So have you ever had like a a little child, like 2, 3 years old, and you say, don't touch that, right? The child doesn't hear anything but touch that. And they look at you and their hand gets closer and you're like, don't you dare touch that. Don't touch it. And they touch it, right? It's the same thing with your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind throws out the negative and focuses on that. So with that child, what you would typically, want to do is redirect. Hey, how about we go over here and, play with this instead? Or maybe you reframe it as far as touching that is going to hurt, or it's really hot, or something like that, right? So instead of don't touch that, all the child hears is touch that, right? So instead of that, we want to try to reframe it. So this isn't about like your child, but I'm just trying to show you an example because this is how your brain perceives things whenever you tell it something. So if you're telling your brain, I don't want to be thinking about it, or I don't want to feel sad, it just focuses on the part that says to feel sad, or to keep thinking about it, or to be miserable forever. And of course, we don't want that. We want to experience the good things, the happiness, the joy, the peace, the indifference. That's what we want to bring more of into our lives. One of the very first things that I do with my clients when we start working together is we establish a vision. We need to know where they want to go, how they want to be feeling, what they want their life to look like. If you start a journey or plan a vacation and you have no idea where the destination is, you are going to be wandering aimlessly. And ultimately, the goal is not to be wandering. That's where people feel stuck, is in the wandering, is not having a clear direction. So coming up with a vision of where you want your life to be, where you want to go, how you want it to look, all the details, and how you want to be feeling are really, really important. So if you can visualize that, like look at all the things that maybe you're lacking, and then say, well, what do I want more of? That's how you start creating a vision for yourself. And when you can see the vision, and when you can believe that happiness and joy are possible for you, then what happens is your brain starts to focus on that. Your brain starts to focus more and more and more on the things that you show it more of. This is how your brain is wired. It actually puts emphasis in the areas that you say is important. So if you're thinking of something bad, something scary, something traumatic continually, then your brain thinks that's important to you, so it makes you see more of it. So when we shift the thoughts and we shift the vision to something more positive and uplifting and good for us, then the brain goes, oh, well, that must be important, so I'm going to show her more of that. Now, I know that when you have been emotionally abused, that it's really hard sometimes to even believe that that's possible. It's hard to see a brighter future. But if I have achieved this after 20 years of emotional abuse, that I have been able to experience true love, experience joy and laughter, have adventure in my life, have fun, be at peace, not get triggered, stop ruminating, right? If I can do that and I can have all these wonderful things in my life, then that is also possible for you. Now, it takes a commitment, right? One of my biggest drivers was wanting to be free of my ex. And I knew that if I was being triggered, he still had control. If I was thinking about him, he still had control. If I was getting defensive, he still had control. If I was getting in fights with my boyfriend about something that was because of my trauma, he was the one in control, right? And to me, that was just not okay. That was just not okay. He had enough control. I wasn't going to give him any more. So it was actually my responsibility to make the changes. Now, he's the one that created the damage. Yes, I realize that. And if you're listening too, you're probably like, yeah, well, they're the one that did all this to us. Now we have to be the one to heal. But what if you think about it as we get to be the one to heal, right? We get to do this so that we can level up, so that we can be a better person, so that we can have a greater life. And I think if you look at it like that, instead of like, well, I shouldn't have to do all this hard work. What about if you get to, right? What if that's actually a gift for you? That now all of a sudden you are living a life on your terms. You are living a life of freedom. You do not have to be triggered. You are not experiencing these negative feelings anymore because of someone else outside of you. That's where the power comes from. So after abuse, you can find confidence and self-love and new opportunities for your life. I've gotten to do so many wonderful things that I never thought was possible before when I was with my ex, and even shortly after when I was on my healing journey, before I discovered the real root of why I was in that black and white Kansas for so long. And once I figured out how to get out of there, it opened my eyes to so many more wonderful things. But again, I have to emphasize, believing it's possible for you and holding the vision of your future that you want to create, that you want to design, is going to be key here. And I say this because, again, without any idea about where you're going, you're just going to be wandering aimlessly. So how do you do this? How do you actually create the vision? And one of the things that you can do to create the vision is to get out a piece of paper and map it out. So, if you're going to be creating a table, or you're going to be creating a business plan, or you're going to be creating a gift for someone, you're going to probably, if you've never done it before, sketch it out, put it on paper, write it down, brainstorm some ideas. That's what you got to do here. This can't just be thoughts that live in your head. It has to also be a plan. So get on a piece of paper and write down, what specifically do you want for your life? And if you're thinking, well, I don't know, then what do you not want? Write that down. I don't want this. I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to be triggered, right? All you have to do then, once you have your list of what you don't want, is take the opposite of that. So if you don't want to be triggered, you want to feel peace. If you don't want to get angry, you want to experience indifference. Whatever that might be for you. But if you're having trouble thinking about what you do want, then go back and look at what you don't want, and then take the opposite of that. And that will reveal to you what actually you want more of in your life. Also, if you're struggling with what you want for your life, look at what's missing. Try to fill in the gaps of what's missing. Do you have a lot of stress? Would you rather have a lot more laughter? Do you have a lot of defensiveness and you'd really like a lot more peace? Whatever that might be, right? You have to put it on paper and start to map it out. Another thing that you do when you're trying to come up with your vision is write down how you want to be feeling. So some people may be able to identify the things they want, like I want more joy or whatever. But actually, how do you want to feel, right? Like, what's the emotion? Like, maybe you want to feel empowered, or maybe you want to feel really successful, or maybe you want to feel proud of yourself, right? What are the emotions that you want to be feeling? And write those down, because that's important too to creating this vision. It's not just like, oh, I want to live a happy life. We got to get specific here. We got to show your brain the details. Your brain loves details. It loves images and stories and analogies and all of that stuff. So we got to get detailed and specific. So the other thing that you can do is write down what this looks like. What does it actually look like to feel empowered? Let's just use that for example. Let's say you say, I really want to feel empowered. Well, what does that actually look like? If you were watching a movie, what would be playing on that movie about someone who's empowered? Does that person walk a certain way, talk a certain way? Do they set specific kinds of boundaries? Do they stand up for themselves and others? What does that empowered person actually do? What do they look like? How do they speak? What do they think? This is where we got to get, we're getting really deep into this to help you establish the vision. Then what happens is all these things come together. You have emotions, you have ideas, and you have specific details. And so you have this mapped out on paper. You can print pictures out of what this looks like for you. Go on Pinterest, go online, Google images of powerful people, right? that you aspire to be like. Put those up on a vision board. Maybe you write powerful affirmations and stick them around your house. Put them on Post-it notes, or maybe you have an affirmation app on your phone that, twice a day pops up and gives you an affirmation about reminding you about how powerful you are. I don't know what you would prefer. You got to choose and you got to figure out what works for you, right? Post-it notes don't really work for me because I don't pay attention to them. Like, I'll put them up and then I ignore them. So if you're that way too, then obviously that's not going to work for you. Use what works for you. If you're on your phone a lot and notifications pop up randomly and you're always checking, maybe that's a better option for you. Okay? Journaling, making a commitment to journal out what this looks like for you. If you're artistic, maybe you draw it, maybe you paint it. What does this look like? What is this life about for you? And all you're doing here when you're creating this vision is you're putting the language of the subconscious mind front and center. You're giving details, you're using emotion, and you're telling your brain on repeat what you want. And then your brain steps up and goes, oh, okay, well, I need to focus on this more because this is what's important. You might want to think about it like if you were planning on buying a piece of land and building a house, and you took all the steps up front to purchase the property and to get contractors lined up. You start looking at plans, you start, getting ideas, working with an architect and a designer and all these things. You put together this whole entire vision of what you want it to be. It's not there yet. It's just not like you can snap your fingers and the house is there. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes practice, it takes vision. You've got to have a vision. If you have no idea what you want your house to look like, or the decorations you want in it, or the paint colors, or the structure, or 2-story or one, then it's going to be really tough to bring that house to life. So it's the same thing with your brain. You have to focus on what you want your life to look like. So just fast forward out like 6 months. Fast forward out 6 months or maybe a year. In 6 months, I want my life to be this. This is what I really want. And here's the other thing. You have to be kind to yourself because you may have these ideas in your brain, but that doesn't mean they're always going to be exactly what you envisioned. And they may also take longer than what you thought. Or maybe there's been some bump in the road and you had to pivot and maybe change that. Or maybe you decided to because you're like, this vision doesn't really serve me anymore and I don't really want to roll with this one. And that's fine too, right? So being flexible, being kind to yourself, and knowing that it's just a vision. You can change it anytime you want. But I want to bring this up because if you are stuck in this black and white Kansas because of black and white thinking, because of all the programming, because of not having a vision and being able to see what your future can be, it's going to be so much harder. And, I want everybody who's listening to this to have an easy time going forward after abuse, because guess what? You had the worst time. You had the shittiest time being in an emotionally abused relationship. And I know this because I've been there too. But I'm telling you right now, if I didn't believe it was possible for me, if I didn't have a vision in mind, if I didn't set my sights on things like the vacation that I wanted to go to and having adventures in my life and bringing more joy in, I would never be talking to you right now. I wouldn't be having this podcast and being able to give you this information. So that's why I think it's so important to set your sights on what you really want. And not just in your brain, I just want to be happy, or, I just want to feel okay or feel normal. No, we got to make this detailed and specific because your brain doesn't understand plain old words. It just doesn't. Your brain hearing plain old words is like me trying to understand Chinese. I don't understand Chinese. It doesn't make any sense to me. If somebody drew me a picture and pointed to some things for me, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, I can sort of figure out what this is. Or a movie playing that I could understand, but I don't understand the language. And your brain doesn't understand regular old words either. That's why it's important to show it the vision. All right, so tomorrow, October 25th, 2023, at the time of this recording, we are going to be live and on a Zoom call for my 3-day Thriver event, Shift Happens. And we're going to be talking about the vision in there too. So if you need help with creating a vision for yourself, you can come, and I'm going to be there to answer your questions and help you and guide you and give you some practical ways to do this. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be informative. I've got some silly little surprises. I've got a guest on the last day. And the whole reason I wanted to do it this way was because I've signed up for free events before, and I end up really disappointed because I feel like I wasted my time sitting there for hours, and then at the end they just try to sell me something, and it doesn't really feel like I walked away with any value, and I didn't want to do that for you all. Now, obviously I can't coach you without a coaching contract, and I can't do like one-on-one with people without you being part of my program, but there's a lot of stuff that I can share, and I want to share it with you because if I can help you even just a little bit, then I'm happy to do that. So come to the event, and actually, if you can't come, because I know I have a lot of listeners in the UK and different time zones, you can just sign up for it, and then you'll get the replay, so you can actually watch it afterwards and still have access to everything that we're going over. So it should be really fun, and I hope that you can make it. And again, we'll go through the vision and all of that, because I want you to be able to go from your black and white Kansas to your colorful, sparkling Oz. And that is so very important for me to be able to share with you how I've gotten there and the things that I've been able to experience after 20 years of emotional abuse. You know, you think you're never going to get out of it, and you get out of it, and then you think you're never going to heal, and you heal. So you have to know that this is possible for you too. And when you can make that shift and you can see that it is possible for you, there's just some things you have to do, some actions you have to take, and some beliefs you have to shift. You can actually make that happen for you too. So if you'd like to come, you can get the link in the show notes here, or you can send me a message on Instagram or Facebook, and I'd be happy to send it to you there. But the last day to sign up is today. So if you want to come, then I'll see you there tomorrow. Have a great day. Thank you for being here with me today in the Emotional Abuse Recovery Podcast. I hope you found value here with me. If this podcast episode was helpful to you, I'd love for you to hit subscribe and leave me a review. My goal is to help you go from feeling stuck to set free. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, and you can check out whentearsleavescars.com for more resources and information to help you with your own emotional abuse recovery. Until next time, here's to believing in